You're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies because it's been so bastardized over the millennium and people are so afraid of it. And there's nothing to be afraid of. And you know that. You've seen it many times.
Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Christina Aroche,
Luisa Vélez, and today we're chatting with the amazing Julie Ryan. We had so much fun. I say this every episode, but it's true. She's a medical intuitive, psychic, inventor, and author who helps people connect with their bodies, their loved ones on the other side, and their spiritual support team. She also hosts Ask Julie Ryan. That's a podcast. And she shares insight on everything from energy healing to the afterlife. We're so exciting. Let's dive in.
Hello, Julie. Welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you here with us.
Oh, I'm delighted and honored to be with you guys. Thanks so much for the invitation to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so excited about this conversation today. We do follow your work, so we're excited to dive into all this interesting stuff and about healing energy, which I love to hear more about that. You're very unique and you have a very interesting background, like inventor and entrepreneur, but also a healer and intuitive. So maybe for our listeners and people who are not familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a businesswoman and an inventor and former manufacturer of surgical devices sold throughout the world. I'm a buffet of psychicness because I'm a medical intuitive and psychic medium. And I learned how to be a woo-woo girl. I didn't wake up with dead people chasing me since childhood. I learned how to be a buffet of psychicness. So it makes every day lots of fun.
That's so interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I'm so curious to hear about your process and how you got there.
Yeah, sure. And I teach people all over the world how to do all this stuff that I do too. About 30 years ago, one of my girlfriends gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And I read her book and I wanted to know more. So back then, you guys, we didn't have the internet yet. So I went to a bookstore to see what they had. And I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan, who's a former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable language on how to use energy to heal. And at that point, I'd been in the medical supply business for 10 years so far. And as I mentioned, I was inventing surgical devices. So I was always interested in helping people heal, helping doctors and surgeons help people heal. And I thought, all right, this is really interesting. So after I finished reading Barbara Brennan's book, I called her school and I said, do you have anybody in my area teaching this stuff? And lo and behold, there was a graduate of her school that had just opened a school of her own. And so I studied with her for 6 years and learned how to do all of this. Well, fast forward, I teach people how to do it in a weekend now. And I equate that to kind of like back in the day, we used carrier pigeons to communicate with one another, and now we can do it instantly with our phones and online. And so, yeah, back when I started studying this stuff, my friends and family were saying, why are you doing this? I'd say, I don't know. And they said, well, what are you going to do with it? And I say, again, I have no clue. It's just interesting. And here I am 30 years later, made a career out of it. I sold my surgical device manufacturing company in 2015 and thought, all right, now what? And I founded 9 companies in 5 industries. So I am one of those crazy entrepreneurs. And I am truly a businesswoman who learned how to do woo-woo. And that's what I teach people how to do.
Yeah, that's incredible because I feel like for a lot of people, there is that disconnect, like you said, like the business world and tech and science and all that. That's one side of the brain. But then there's, like you said, this woo-woo side. And I believe that it exists in all of us. And, I have a background in science too. Like I say, biochemistry. I was working as a toxicologist. So I can very much relate to that bridging that gap between the journey of being on this one side of things and then completely shifting and changing and following what feels like a true calling. Is that what it felt like for you when you made that transition? When you were like, take us back to that moment in 2015 or whenever that was, when you were considering like, okay, what am I going to do now? And how am I meant to bring this gift and this connection into the world?
Well, one point I want to make, and then I'll answer your question, Christina. One point I want to make is once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. I don't understand why it's segmented and siloed. You got the psychics and you got the healers and you got the pet psychics and you got the past life people. Once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. That's what I call my buffet of psychicness. And that's what I teach. And furthermore, I agree with you. Everybody comes in with the ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. Every little child can see spirits, can communicate with spirits until they have an adult in their life say, oh no, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not really real. Even though they're talking about stuff that the parents can validate with historic documentation online about a past life that they're discussing or something along those lines. So everybody has the ability. We just learn to shut it down, usually as children. So how this all came about around 2015, I guess, when I was selling my company and I got through that, I had when I was with my mentor, and I usually talk to her at least once a month. She's in her 80s now, and she does a healing on me. So when I'm with her, my deceased loved one's spirits are on either side of the table. I'm on a massage table with a blankie on. I'm all snuggly. And then they are all in the room and they're participating in the healing. And then others will show up. Sometimes the Virgin Mary's there. Sometimes other spirits come in. Well, one day, the spirit of this dead Pope comes in. And he's got his Pope hat on and his shepherd's rod and the whole 9 yards. And I said, and my mentor could see him too. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, oh, great. How may I help you? No. First I said, I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he said, I was number 6. And I said, okay, great. How may I help you? And he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies, because it's been so bastardized over the millennium and people are so afraid of it. And there's nothing to be afraid of. And you know that. You've seen it many times. And I said, I'm a businesswoman. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm not doing that because people are going to think I'm nuts. And it might affect my companies or something. I guess so. This was before I sold my last company. And he goes, yeah. Just get on with it. You know what's going on. You need to teach the world what's happening. I said, yeah, well, thanks, but no thanks. So you guys, I leave the office and I get in my car and just for kicks, I looked him up on my phone. Come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague, when 2/3 of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, Ryan, you can't make that up. I mean, no way. So I just didn't do anything with it. Went through the sale of my company, which was involved in all of that. And then one day I was at church and I was sitting between my husband and my son. This was a couple of years later. And from the altar during his sermon, the priest is saying, wouldn't it be interesting if somebody could tell us if really the angels and our loved ones greet us and take us to heaven? And I'm getting elbowed by my son and my husband. And I'm thinking, God, really? From the pulpit, you're giving me grief about this? And so then I finally decided to write my book, Angelic Attendance, What Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. And it has illustrations in it about how angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets surround us as we're transitioning, which I've seen in my mind's eye thousands of times. And so that's what Pope Clement was talking about, teaching the world what happens when somebody's dying.
That's so incredibly interesting.
So fascinating.
Yeah. And then how life will make us, the divine God whatever you want to call it, will make us uncomfortable enough and send enough signals that's like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing
all right already. Yeah.
right.
I feel like Pope Clement treats me like a Nike ad sometimes, and he'll just say, just do it. Just do it. And I learned probably 10 years ago with him that I used to debate him on things, and I'd argue with not argue, but I'd debate him and I'd say, well, I can't do that because of this, 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 and this. And he'd be like, just do it. And you know what I've learned over the years? He's always right. Duh. And so I don't argue with him anymore or debate him. If I'm asking his opinion about something and he gives it to me, I just follow it because he's always right. Of course, he has access to universal intelligence. By the way, anybody that's listening or watching, if you want a free copy of Angelic Attendance, we'll send you one. Just go to julieryangift.com, and we'll send you an audiobook and a digital version. And we have it in Spanish too for free for you as well. And you can have the downloads, and you're welcome to buy the paperback if you want. But I give away thousands of these because I believe this information should be taught in the schools. So please share it with your family and friends as well.
Yeah, it absolutely should be taught in school, and it's something that we should be able to just grow up knowing about. I'm curious. So you're still communicating. So Clement is just one of your just guides, and he's just has this relationship with you all the time.
Well, we're all communicating with spirits all day long, every day. We're just not realizing it. And it's just a matter of how I teach this, ladies, is our heads are big satellite dishes, and they receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. So in order to get in touch with someone, whether you knew them or not is irrelevant. Likewise, whether their spirit's attached to a body or not is irrelevant. All you have to do is think of them. That tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency, and it opens up something similar to a two-way radio communication channel. And you say something either in your mind or aloud, and they're going to answer you. And how you know that's coming from spirit is it's that first thing that comes in your head, fast as you can snap your fingers. And sometimes they'll answer you even before you have the thought finished. And we all do that all the time. We are all using our intuitive abilities. I know you guys have had situations where you thought of somebody and then all of a sudden they text you or they call you or you run into them or you get an email from them and you say, oh my gosh, I was just thinking of you and here you are. What a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. That's your intuition at play.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you describe that too. That's such a great visual, I feel like, to understand. And that often happens. I've had many situations like that with people. And also I find when connecting with angels, because that's a huge part of the work that I do with the angelic realm. And so I feel like I'll just start to think about Archangel Michael or whoever, and it just feels like his presence is immediately here. Like I haven't even asked anything yet, and I feel like even thinking about him is just like, right. Oh, hi, he's right here.
See, you're doing it, but you just didn't realize how you were doing it. Yeah. But that's what we all do, and that's what we all can do. The thing that's really the most fun about it is when we understand we have access to any spirit, whether we knew them or not. You know, who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to Archangel Michael? You want to talk to Moses, Elvis, you know, right. Mother Teresa? Who? It doesn't matter. You just think of them, and that tunes you into their frequency, kind of like a radio station or a satellite TV station. Yeah. It's always broadcasting on that channel. It's just you tuning into that channel.
That's so
and it's
cool.
Really convenient that spirits rather keep the same frequency throughout all their lifetimes. Because I had a client a couple of days ago say, well, I'd really talked to my grandmother, but I believe that she's reincarnated by now because she's been dead for over 25 years. I said, that doesn't matter. You're connecting into her spirit. Doesn't matter if she's reincarnated or not. It's going to be her spirit that's going to communicate with you.
I love that you just addressed that, because I was literally about to ask you what you thought of that exact same situation of what happens, when someone's passed
Yeah.
and maybe if they're incarnated, but then it feels like we are still connecting with that version of their soul, and you just answered it beautifully. So thank you.
I must be psychic or
Yeah,
something.
maybe. I
Okay. Yeah. But another interesting point about that too, Christina, is that spirits are always going to show up in a way that's going to help us be comfortable with identifying them.
don't know.
So when we're talking with a grandmother's spirit in heaven, the grandmother's going to communicate to us in a way that it's going to feel familiar to us. They're going to give us examples of things that we would relate to that perhaps we'd experienced together when grandma was alive. And even if grandma is reincarnated. And the thing that really gets interesting, and this makes my brain want to explode, is when there are lots of schools of thought that we live multiple lifetimes concurrently. And I don't understand that from a human perspective, but I go to the place of, all right, is it feasible? Yeah. Do I understand it? No. Will I understand it when I'm back in heaven? Yeah. So that satisfies me in the
Yeah.
short run.
So interesting. We pre-recorded our episodes. We have alone episodes where it's just Christina and myself, and it's so nothing's a coincidence. But how you're bringing in some of the topics that we were just talking about yesterday, it's just so funny to me that. And we were calling on an expert to come in and talk to us about some of these topics, and so I just find. Yeah, they have a sense of humor and they have a way of connecting the dots like that for us, and it's just so fun to watch.
Well, and it's fun to remember too that time doesn't exist in the spirit world, because this appointment between the three of us was scheduled quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so you were just talking about it
absolutely.
yesterday, but they had it all lined up so that it would be
Exactly.
perfect timing for all of it.
There's exactly divine timing. That's
Yeah.
that's just it. I am curious to dive in. We've talked about guides. We've talked about loved ones who have passed on. How do you experience the angelic realm, and how does that look like for you? I mean, I know Christina has a particular experience with the realm. I have a different experience with the realm. How do you interact with and experience angels?
Well, good Catholic girl, 12 years of Catholic schools. Angels look to me like the statuary and the
Mhm.
paintings and all of the Western, descriptions or depictions of angels, archangels. I went to St. Michael grade school, for heaven's sake. So, on the altar in the church was this big statue of St. Michael with his shield and his sword and his mini skirt, Roman warrior empire, uniform that he wore, and those lace up sandals up his calves and all of that. Angels look to me like they appear in the paintings and the statuary. They're big, they got big wings, they wear a white gown, they got a rope belt, they're barefoot. They all look the same. Like guardian angels all look the same, cherubs all look the same, archangels look the same, that kind of thing. And that's how they appear to me. Now, that's my frame of reference
Right.
based on how I was taught angels look. Somebody growing up in an indigenous culture, perhaps in the Amazon, may see angel energy as just a blob of a purple ball or something, a purple orb. And it's all correct. Back to what I mentioned earlier, spirit's always going to show us themselves in a way that we can incorporate it, feel comfortable with it, and identify with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all have very unique experiences, and it's all for our benefit at the end of the day and what's going to make us feel comfortable. But it's just really, yeah, interesting to hear about people's experiences with the angelic realm. And so, how do you describe them and their role in our everyday lives?
Well, it's interesting. Guardian angels stay with us throughout all of our lifetimes, which is really cool. They stay with us in heaven when we're in between lives. I see them. I just saw them yesterday, saw a guardian angel. My daughter-in-law's dad had surgery, and I am able to view real time, do remote viewing real time. And I was checking him out when he was in surgery, when he was, under anesthesia and having the surgery performed on him. And the guardian angel is always over the patient, over anesthesia in the operating room. And then there are surgeon spirits and then other deceased loved ones and pets spirits sometimes that are in the room as well. So our guardian angel is always with us. I learned the guardian angel prayer as a little tiny kid. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here. Most Catholics around the world have heard that prayer when they were little. They're around us all the time. And especially when somebody's dying, that's where I see the most angels. And it's really interesting to me in the dying process. There's lots of information about the afterlife, lots of information about near-death experiences, not so much about what's happening when somebody's dying. And that's what most people are afraid of. And that's why Pope Clement came in and he said, you got to teach the world what happens. So there are a bunch of angels that show up when we're dying. And it's always the maternal spirit closest to the person who's dying, who's running the show from the spirit world. That was a big surprise to me. First time I saw this scenario was when my own mother was dying in 2002. I'd never been around anybody who was dying before. And so my grandmother, who had died 6 months prior, she was in there and she was running the show. Now I thought, maybe there was like some special department in heaven where somebody was dying and God would just dispatch a dying angel to go help. That's not what I perceive. So it's the mother's spirit that shows up first, then the closest paternal spirit to the person who's dying. And the mother spirit calls in the angels. And these are big angels. They're 6-7 feet tall, big wings, all of that. And they form a circle around the person who's dying. And as they get closer to death, that circle opens up into a horseshoe and eventually into a straight line at like the foot of the bed if somebody's in a bed. And that's kind of like, I call that angelic crowd control because there's so many spirits, like bazillions of them that show up. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. But that line of angels is the line of demarcation between the human world and the spirit world, as I perceive it. And there are several nuances in that procedure of the transition process that I'd love to share if you'd like to hear them.
Yes, please.
Okay.
I was about to ask yes.
As the spirits, as somebody's dying, and the cool thing about this, I've called it the 12 phases of transition. And it happens, again, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. I think it was the Romans or Greeks who came up with time as we know it, the concept. And so everybody goes through the 12 phases of transition. Everybody goes to heaven, first of all. This whole concept of, are you going to fly or are you going to fry when you die? Everybody flies. Everybody goes to heaven. There was a movie out in the 80s called All Dogs Go to Heaven. All people go to heaven too. Because the snarky personalities and the, mass murders and stuff, that's a role they're playing. All spirits are pure love. So anyways, so these angels show up and then they go into from a circle into a horseshoe and then a straight line. Two nuances. As somebody's dying, the spirit exits through the top of the head. You'll hear NDEers talk about going through a tunnel a lot of the time. There is a vortex that's created. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they hang on to the top of the head, the spirit does. And it reminds me of a cartoon speech bubble, where the character's thoughts or words are.
Yeah.
And then as these other spirits are arriving about between phase 5 and phase 6, there are 2 extra angels that show up and they're on either side of the spirit bubble. They position themselves. And I saw this with my mom and I thought, this is going to be interesting because I don't know what these guys are here for, but I know that they're going to play a role. And I felt like the Lady of Justice statue when my mom was dying. She's trying to balance both parts of the scale because my heart was breaking on the one side. And on the other side, I'm watching all this stuff in my mind's eye that was glorious. I thought, okay, what's going to happen next? So I kind of felt like a schizo a little because my heart was breaking. And then I was like, oh, cool. What's going to happen next? So when those angels show up about phase 9, their wings start to move very slowly and rhythmically. And their wings moving formed this vortex above my mom's head. That's the tunnel that NDEers talk about. And it reminded me of a giant owl's wings. And I thought, oh my God, I can see this, I can hear it, I can feel it. And this is happening in the spirit world, and I can feel it from my physical perspective, which I thought was remarkable.
Wow.
So when I was writing Angelic Attendance, I was led to look that up. And what I found was when I did an internet research I just typed in owl wings vortex. Well, I learned there's this phenomenon, an aeronautical engineering phenomenon called the wingtip vortex.
What?
Amazing.
There are thousands and thousands of drawings and articles and studies and pictures and stuff about the wingtip vortex. And so it's the movement of the angel's wings that causes upward lift, helps the spirit detach from the body. And likewise, anything that flies, every plane, every jet, every kite, every bird, every bug, there are these vortices that form that cause lift. All right. The other thing that's interesting about the vortex is it has this upward suction phenomenon. And it reminded me of being in the car wash at the end, where they turn on the dryers and it's sucking all the water off your car, kind of a thing. I thought, oh my heavens. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was there's a prayer said at the end of every Roman Catholic funeral called In Paradisum. And in Latin, it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. So I thought, I want to see where that originated. And what I learned was that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. Now, perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. And certainly back then, some of the most learned people were men living in monasteries and synagogues. So I believe that people have been able to see this phenomenon, what I call the 12 phases of transition, since the beginning of time. And perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody could really write it down. And then as we've become more well-educated in the last 150 to 200 years and more proof-based, we've lost some of that. Although science is caught up with woo-woo because university-based research now shows that 90% of people see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as they're transitioning.
Wow.
It used to be, we thought, oh, grandma's hallucinating. It's the morphine. No, it's not. Grandma can really see her deceased mother's spirit who's in the room, who's been dead for 60 years.
Right.
So it's really comforting, and it's been really fascinating to watch all this unfold.
That's amazing. And I really love that you're also teaching this in a perspective of helping people to overcome their fear of the afterlife and of death and things like that. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you in talking about this, and like you were saying, everyone goes to heaven. What is your observation or opinion or, belief around so-called ghosts and spirits that seem to stay bound to earth and kind of haunting places or whatever? What is that?
What I know is that everybody goes to heaven because I see their spirits all carried to heaven. It's said that once we're in heaven that we do a review, that it's instant. we think about we're up there, we're studying our life. I think it's a nanosecond. Back to the concept, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. And then we decide, okay, I want to go back and I want to explore and experience this. What I know is that there's no right or wrong in heaven. There's just an adventure. It's just when we're going through something perhaps even horrific here in our human form, our loved ones and our angels in heaven are going, oh, cool. What's she going to create out of this? This is going to be fun to watch. And we're thinking, fun?
Right.
There's nothing fun about this. But we all look back at tough times and we say, yeah, that was hell going through that. And yet here's what I learned and I'm glad I went through it. Don't want to do it again, but here's the good things that came out of it. So to your question, Christina, what I know is that everybody goes to heaven. Perhaps when we're planning what's our next adventure, there are those spirits that say, I want to explore what it's like to have one foot in the spirit world and one foot in the human world and not be seen, but not to remember that I'm a spirit. Right. To think that I'm still in my human body. I have tons of stories about ghosts, tons. And so when I encounter that with a client or in my own experience, actually, I have a couple of stories about that in the book. What I do is I bring in their loved ones in spirit and get them to follow those loved ones back into heaven. And I'll help them go into the light if they're ready. Some of them aren't ready. Right. They want to continue to explore things. But people say, oh, I got all these evil ghosts and evil spirits. There are no such things as evil spirits. That's all been concocted to control the masses with fear since the beginning of time. We saw that during the pandemic. What's the best way to control people? With fear. Right. And we get people to do stuff that doesn't make sense when they're afraid. And so there are no evil spirits. What happens is we go into fight or flight because we're scared, because we've been taught to be scared if there's a spirit in the room. And we lose clarity because our stress hormones go up, right? And the blood drains from our brain, goes to our heart and our extremities so we can run away from whatever it is we're fearing, and we lose clarity. I had a client recently that said that, I think it was last year, she said she had this bright light in her room and it had this kind of grayish halo around it, and she thought it was an evil spirit. And she said, I just told it to leave right away. So we did an instant replay because, again, time doesn't exist in the spirit world, so we can do instant replays in a nanosecond. Well, it was her guardian angel that was showing itself to her. We got the angel's name, we got all that information. And I said, you just went into fight or flight, which is an autonomic nervous system response. We don't even consider that. If we're in fear, the body doesn't know any differently between a real fear and a fake fear. Right. It just goes into fight or flight so that you can run away from the fear. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I love that. I love hearing that and that perspective, and just, I feel like it helps to deepen the understanding around, what are they doing? What are these spirits doing who are coming with ghosts, and why,
Well, and all you have to do is just ask them. Say, hey, who are you? How can I help you? Like what I said to Pope Clement. How can I help you? Why are you here? Do you have a message for me? May I share a fun story with you about ghosts?
Yes.
My daughter-in-law, Mallory, oh gosh, this was probably 10 or 12 years ago. It was Thanksgiving Day. She was at her grandmother's house, and she and her mom and her aunt and her grandmother were all in the kitchen, doing all the Thanksgiving dinner prep stuff. And grandma had these antique big spoons and stuff hanging on the side of her cabinet. And they all watched the spoons come off on their own off the cabinet and slam on the floor.
Wow.
And they were all saying, what is this? And so she's, of course, on the phone with me right away going, can you scan that? Who is this? And what I saw was a farmer and his son. This was in the South, in America here. And his son was dressed in a Confederate uniform. and they were there and they were trying to get the grandmother's attention because there was something that was getting ready to burn in the oven.
Whoa.
So I asked them their name. I got like all this information. I said, thanks so much, you guys. You ready to go into the light? And I brought some of their deceased loved ones' spirits and they led them into the light. Well, one of the other grandsons, he looked it up and they found that that property was a farm originally. And Mallory's grandmother said that she found farm, tools in the garden, like buried, almost like, an archaeological dig kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And they found their name. They found the deed, the original deed to the property. They found the Confederate soldier's son's information, what battalion he was in, all that kind of jazz. And they were able to corroborate everything. May I share one more fun story?
Yes, these are so cool.
It involves a Confederate soldier again. One of my dear friends, this happened before I knew her, and she had this situation where she said, I had an evil spirit come through my front door one night and I told it to leave. And I said, oh, tell me about it. She was telling me the story and I'm doing the instant replay and I can see what's happening in my mind's eye as she's telling me this story. And so this spirit's coming through her really thick wooden double doors, front doors, and its appearance was distorted, kind of like back when the robbers used to put a pair of pantyhose over their faces, so that they couldn't be recognized. And that's what was happening as his spirit was coming through this really thick wooden door. And she had an umbrella stand next to the front door. And one of her son's golf clubs was in the umbrella stand. And she took it out and she started to swing it at the spirit. And she said, you're not welcome here. You need to leave my house right now. And she thought it was an evil spirit. So I said, that wasn't an evil spirit. There are no evil spirits. Well, come to find out, this was a guy who had died in the Civil War. He was looking for his daughter's spirit. When he died, I think the daughter was 4. Well, the daughter had reincarnated as my girlfriend's daughter.
What?
And so he was attracted to her spirit. And so we were able to get his name. We were able to get, his information from what regiment he was in and all of that in the Confederate Army. We got the birth certificate of the daughter. And so I pulled in the daughter's spirit and she let him back into the light. And so, these stories I have hundreds of them, of stories like that about ghosts.
Right.
And when people talk about, well, I knew a woman who said that she worked in an antique or like in a antebellum home in Nashville, and it was a law office. And she said she'd walk down this hallway where all these books were and books would come flying out at her. Yeah. She said, there are ghosts down there, man, because these books come flying out at me. And she said, I think they're evil spirits. I said, they're not evil spirits. They're trying to get your attention.
Right.
By doing that. I said, have you ever been hurt? She said, no, but it's unnerving. Yeah. I said, I understand that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really fun.
Just out of curiosity. So there's no evil spirits, but are there spirits that are experiencing, maybe connecting to emotional states of when they were human in their life? So are they're feeling perhaps fear or anger or any other emotions, and that's why we maybe perceive them as like being angry ghosts or wrathful ghosts? I don't know. Great question. It's our fear that perceives it that way because we are not working from a place of clarity. So we're going into projecting that fear on that spirit. All those emotions are human emotions. Spirits are pure energy. They don't have emotions. Their only emotion is pure joy. Does that resonate? Yeah. It's that automatically going into fight or flight when we're in fear, when we're a spirit attached to a body having a human experience. Right. We filter that through our own imagination and fears and anxiety. Well, and when we're afraid, we all go down the black hole of, well, if that happens, then that's going to happen, then that's going to happen, then that's going to happen.
back to COVID, I love this example back when they said, okay, you need to wipe down the handle of the grocery cart when you go in the store. I mean, they were even saying wipe down your bags of groceries when you bring them home before you put them on your countertop, please. So you think about, people's minds. We use our imaginations to envision things we don't want. So, oh my God, if I touch that handle of the cart and I get that virus, and then I scratch my nose and the virus climbs up my nose and infects my body, and then I can't find any medicine and I can't get into a hospital and I'm going to be really sick and then I'm going to die and I'm going to be homeless and starving on the street and sick. Really? No. But that's where our brains go because we're in that spiral of those negative thoughts because we're in fight or flight and we all go there. We all do it. So the key is get out of there fast. Don't let your body be in fight or flight for the 99.9% of thoughts that we think that are fearful, that are fake. Anything based in fear feels bad. Anger, jealousy, boredom, whatever. And we think, oh my God, I'm going to die from it. Well, you're not going to die if you're running late for an appointment, although it feels like it. And then we go into, well, if I'm late, then I'll have to wait another 6 months to get an appointment. And what if there's something really wrong with me and the doctor can't see me and blah, 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 blah. And knock it off. Just, stop it when you first feel that way.
So interesting. Gives me lots to think about. But I want to shift gears. I love ghost talk, but you do a lot of other stuff. So I want to dive into the healing side of things and the energy healing that you do for people and pets. I would love for you to take a minute to walk us through the story and how do you do that and how do you tackle that and how do you perceive their spirit and their journey. But so you have the ability to scan people and heal them in person or remotely. But walk us through that process. How does it work? What do you see? What do you feel?
Yeah.
What do you do in one of these sessions?
Well, I raise my vibrational level to the level of spirit because when our spirit's attached to a body, it vibrates more slowly simply because the body has mass. So I teach this. It takes a nanosecond to raise my vibration to spirit. And then I'll watch a laser beam come from my body wherever I am, and it will hook into the person I'm going to be scanning, whether it's somebody calling into my show. People call in from all over the world on Thursday nights and partake in the buffet of psychicness. It's a blast. Or if it's a private client. And I'm never with the person unless they're a family member or a friend. It's 99.999% remote. I could find you, Louisa, if you were in a galaxy far, far away. Doesn't matter. I can find you. My laser beam hooks in, and then I envision shooting energy from your feet up through the top of your head. And it's as if I'm looking at an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI. I'll have a hologram of you in my mind's eye. And then I'll shoot energy from your feet up through the top of your head. And I always go in blind first because I want to see where the energy is going to go. It's always going to go to the most pressing issue first. Something will be identified immediately thereafter. There will be some type of energetic healing that can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time in my mind's eye that emulate what I saw in surgery for all those years, developing products, testing prototypes, that kind of thing. Oftentimes I see healings that use new methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And I'll say, oh, cool, I haven't seen this before. And it's like it's being added to my bag of tricks. It's a healing that somebody needs specifically for whatever their condition is. And then inevitably, I will see it used on other people, usually in short order. It's like spirit sends me what I need. And then once I've seen it, then it's just an option. So if I have the option, great. If I don't, they send it. I think it's important to remember with energy healing and really with any kind of medical care that nobody heals anybody else ever. No doctor, no medical provider, no shaman, no healer, nobody. We all help the person heal themselves. And you think about You have a big cut in your leg and you go to the emergency room. The doctor's going to stitch it up for you, but the doctor doesn't make your skin grow back. You make your own skin grow back.
Right.
So that's how this works. It's spirit working through me and with me to help you heal yourself. Same thing with dogs. With animals and plants or trees or whatever, I don't ask permission to scan them, but I always ask permission with humans. If somebody's calling into my show or they've scheduled an appointment with me or one of my graduates, I have 5 graduates that work with me and do the whole buffet of psychicness thing for clients too, because there's only so many hours in the day for me to, to work with people. And which oftentimes happens, somebody will say, can you scan my child? Can you scan my friend? Can you scan my whomever? And so we'll ask telepathically for permission to scan them. And if they say no, we won't, because I believe it's a violation of their privacy and I believe it's unethical. So we'll do that. The healings are instantaneous. And the other really fascinating part to me about the healing on an energy level is there's always an emotional component in place before any kind of disease or illness or medical condition arises. And we identify that and eradicate it. And I believe that's the most important part of healing, because we can fix body parts all day long. But if you're leaking power because of an emotional block, what's the point?
Right. It's kind of like it would, even if you did the physical healing, but if the emotional side isn't addressed, then you're going to end up manifesting the same physical thing again and again.
That's right. What I perceive, back to my Catholic school training, I was taught that the spirit is someplace in the chest area, spirit or the soul. That's not what I perceive. What I perceive is that the spirit is the main part of us, the everlasting part of us, and the body's inside the spirit. Mm-hmm. And then there's a container that I call the energy field membrane that reminds me of really thin, stretchy saran wrap. Imagine that in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
And it expands and contracts. And that's what I believe we see depicted in old masters' paintings, where somebody's painted with a halo around their head or their whole body. That's their energy field. It's their spirit. It's their aura. It's all the same thing. So I'm always going to look at the energy field membrane for a leak. Looks like a hole or a tear, and I'll envision myself going into that, and I'll be shown, if it's past life, a scene from where it was, when it was, a little bit about what happened, and we'll correlate that with what's going on in this person's current life. And I can say more about past lives in a minute if you want. And then if it's something that's happened in this current life, it's gotten to the point now where I'll just say, okay, it was 1962. Where were you? What was happening? What comes to mind? And 99% of the time, they'll know instantly. We moved. I started a new school. I hated it. My parents got divorced. My grandmother died. I mean, whatever. It's fascinating how people, it just comes in instantly. And oftentimes it's different life experiences that they haven't thought of in decades, but it forms this little energy block that looks like a little kernel of unpopped popcorn to me in their energy field. And then other emotional events, energy piles on top of it, eventually causing enough pressure, it causes a blowout in the membrane and the person's leaking power. I have a great analogy for that. May I share it?
Yes, please.
Imagine going to the pet store to buy a goldfish. Mm-hmm. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. Well, if you have a picture of that in your mind's eye, the fish represents our body. The water represents our spirit, because again, the body's inside the spirit, and the plastic bag represents the energy field membrane. If there's a pinhole in that plastic bag and water's leaking out a drop at a time, for a long time, that fish is going to be fine. However, when enough water drains out, that fish is going to be in trouble. And that's what happens to the human body. So we fix that leak, body's working on full power, and it helps the person regain and maintain health. It's really fascinating
It's really
how it all works.
fascinating.
I didn't learn that in any training. That came in from spirit after I'd been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
So cool.
I'm curious of all the healing that you've performed in your career. What's one of the most like surprising healings that you've ever experienced?
Two come to mind. One happened many years ago, and I've seen it many times since, where stem cell energy is used to generate a new organ. And I watch the diseased organ get removed like a surgical procedure. I watch the plumbing get clamped off like I saw in surgery all those years. I watch the diseased organ get removed. I watch the new organ that's been generated with stem cell energy put in place. I'll watch the plumbing get reattached. And it's so funny because I'll watch the clamp get removed and sometimes it'll spring a leak. And so I'll watch it get clamped again, and then I'll watch the suturing, energetic suturing happen again. And oftentimes those new organs will show up on subsequent scans at the doctors and at the hospital. And over the years, I've had doctors call me and say, "What the heck are you doing? And how does this stuff work?" So that's really fun. The other thing that seems to be in my zeitgeist here in the last couple of months, I've had 3 clients that were having infertility issues. And we regenerated their ovaries, and all of them, 2 of them have their babies already.
Wow.
And one is 6 months pregnant and everything's going smoothly. So when I watch the ovaries get regenerated, they're full of eggs. So let's say one of my clients is 45 years old and the docs are saying, you don't have enough fertile eggs and it's not going to work and all that. I'm like, yeah. That's just his opinion. So we'll do a healing on the ovary and the eggs look like blonde caviar to me. I get these hilarious, comparisons in my mind, the pictures that spirit sends me so that we can identify from a human perspective these different body parts and what's going on. And what a joy that is for these moms that are having trouble conceiving. And I can see babies' energies when they're over the mom's shoulder when I'm scanning somebody, because a baby's energy will attach to the mom's energy field many times years before it incarnates. And all of those moms, I said, we got baby's energies over your shoulders. You're going to be a mom. Let's just fix these ovaries.
That's amazing. What a
So
miracle.
wonderful. And so 2 follow-up questions and then we'll get to the pets. So when you see the baby energy, when a baby, also we have cases when the baby passes away, and then are they still attached to their mom after they cross over? Is that your experience, that they stay with mom?
Not in that form. Okay. Great question. Not in that form. I will see baby's energy and they'll show me they'll be like a newborn baby or sometimes a fetus. I've done healings many times on fetuses that are having problems in utero with like holes in their heart, or placenta previa where the placenta is coming apart from the uterine wall, and all kinds of amazing healings in utero that I've been able to witness. But that baby spirit's always around the mom, and the orbs are the babies that haven't been conceived yet. And by the way, the baby's energy attaches to the mom's energy field for both birth babies and adopted babies. Which is really sweet. May I share a story about that?
Yeah.
Several years ago, we were at a neighbor's and my neighbor girlfriend said, here's my other girlfriend who I hadn't met. She's not feeling well. Can you scan her and do all that I've told her about you over the years? And I said, sure. So I got her on my radar. I said, are you pregnant with twins? She didn't look pregnant. I said, are you pregnant with twins, or are you thinking about being pregnant with twins? Or you got twins energy on either side of your body or either side of your shoulders? And she burst into tears. And I thought, oh, good heavens, I've upset this woman. I thought, oh no. And she said, no, it's fine. This was a Saturday night. She said, we're leaving on Wednesday to fly to Guatemala because we're adopting twins. And we're going to be there for their C-section birth on Friday.
That's amazing.
So I have goosebumps just telling you
I
about
do.
that.
We all
And that
do.
was the first time I realized, I thought, oh my goodness, which makes sense.
Yeah.
That the babies choose the birth mother and choose the adopted mother. And by the way, when somebody's dying who's been adopted, it's the mother that raised them who's running the show from the spirit world. The birth mother is there, her spirit, but it's the mother that raises the person who runs the show, brings in the angels and others. So that's kind of fun.
As moms.
Yeah. What's that?
That our job as moms is just never done.
Yeah.
Even in the afterlife, we have to come back
Yeah.
together.
Exactly. We're helping them from beyond the graves. Yeah.
It never stops. That's wonderful.
It's just amazing the things that we get to see once we just connect into spirit, and everybody does this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of developing and enhancing your abilities.
Absolutely. Okay. I can't let you go, and you've been so generous with your time, but we need to talk about pets.
Yeah. What do you want to know?
What is your experience with their soul journey? Because we've talked about different theories about how they incarnate with us in the form of pets, just to go on their own evolution journey of their soul. What are they here doing with us? And how do you perceive their energy when you do healing?
They're a form of a spirit guide, is how I perceive them. They're here to teach us what's going on. As I mentioned, my daughter-in-law's dad was in surgery yesterday, and I was scanning him when he was in the OR. And my son and daughter-in-law's dog, who passed late last year, his little spirit was in there. And he was very attached to Mallory's dad. Before Mallory and Jonathan, my son, took him when they moved to Los Angeles. And Rooney was his name. Rooney's spirit was in there, which made me weepy. I mean, I'm seeing all his loved ones, some of whom I recognized, his parents and his father-in-law and these other spirits in the room. And his mother was German. And there were ancestors in there dressed in German dress, like the lederhosen and the old-fashioned, German dresses and stuff. But when I saw Rooney, I don't see animals in the operating room very often. So that was really special. So I believe that our animals are here to teach us. If you talk to people about their animals and the ailments and things that their animals have, oftentimes they'll match the humans' ailments. Like the human may be diabetic and the cat's diabetic, or let's say that the human's really stressed out all the time and the dog's just like chill all the time. Well, the dog's there to help calm down the person. They're there to benefit them in their lives in a multitude of ways. Animals, I believe, spirit animals are very involved in our day-to-day lives as well. Certainly the indigenous cultures, the American Indians, the whatever, they bring in the spirit animals, and they have the totems, and they have different meanings for the different animals. I find that animals are very spiritual on their own. Horses, wild horses, when one in the herd is dying, they do this ceremony, kind of a maneuver where they call it breathing air. And every horse in the pack, what do you call horses? A bunch of them that are all running together. They will come up and they will put their noses together and breathe the same air. And it's kind of like a goodbye to the horse that's dying.
Wow.
If you look up death rituals with wild horses. It's fascinating.
We'll be crying all night Googling death rituals.
Yeah.
Crows and elephants, and Well,
the elephants, gosh, there's so many stories about elephants traveling for days to go pay their respects to a former like zookeeper or somebody, in the wild that took care of them. Furthermore, I find it fascinating that the spirits of every pet we've had in our lives is with us as we're transitioning. And you'll see that in the in the different illustrations and angelic attendants. I call that the dog pound, although every kind of animal is there.
Yeah.
And they're kind of, as you're looking at the dying person, they're kind of off to the right a little bit, and they're in this section. And again, the first time I saw that was with my mother. And there were dogs there that we'd had as children who'd been dead for 30 years. And one of my best girlfriends from childhood, she was telling her mom, she said, Julie said that Frosty and Rummy, two of our dogs, are there. And she said, she wouldn't make that up. I mean, why would I make that up? And so it's fun when I'm working with a family who has a loved one who's dying, and I'll say, okay, did your grandma grow up on a farm, or does she live on a farm now? Because there's horses and chicks and ducks and pigs and cows and all these farm animals in the room. Their little spirits are there. And they'll say, yeah. And I'll describe the animals, and they say, oh, that was Molly, her cow, and that was Rover, her dog, and whatever. So it's really sweet. Does that answer your question, Louisa?
Yeah, it does. It does. And then I'm guessing healing works as it would for a human. You just go in, scan, repair, and
yeah, and communicate telepathically with the animal.
Yeah.
Most of them say they want more treats.
Of course.
I was talking with, it's hilarious. I have a client whose horse was lame.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's like he's got a torn meniscus. That's human terms. I don't know what the horse term is for his back knee.
Yeah.
And I said, they just need to scope it and they'll be able to do the surgery. And so she's close to University of North Carolina, and they have a big vet school there. I think that's what the school was. And she took it in. She goes, he's got a torn meniscus. I'm paraphrasing, with human terms, and you just need to scope it and fix it. They're looking at her like, sure, lady. And they did an x-ray, and sure enough, that's what was going on. Wow. So we can find out what they're doing. When animals die, their spirit exits through the top of their head, like humans.
Oh, like humans? Great.
Like a human does. But I don't see their litter mate spirits that are there surrounding them. I don't see them surrounded by angels. But I can tell if an animal is dying. And then we'll ask, do you want to be euthanized? How will your human know? How will your mom know? How will your owner know when it's time for you to go? And they'll tell us specifically. Yeah. How they'll know. And they ask for specific things like, can I have my blue blanket? Or can I have, but one dog told me that he just wanted him to leave his water bowl out. And they weren't doing that because the cat was in it all the time and making a mess. And the dog said, can you just leave my water bowl out? Because I'm thirsty. And so they did. And he was great.
Wow.
Yeah, they'll tell us.
That's so fascinating.
Do they have, last, and I'll stop. So they don't have angels or any other guides or companions that go through that experience with them?
Not what I perceive.
Oh, okay. We were wondering yesterday, if they have a spirit team, kind of like we do, like humans.
I don't see that. I don't see that. But again, our spirit guides don't have a team either. And I get that the animals are a physical spirit guide for us to teach us unconditional love, what that feels like, certainly, because you're gone all day and the dog is always thrilled to see you when you get home because they don't have any concept of time. Yeah. And they're just here to be our companions and to show us love and to support us as well.
Thank you for that.
So amazing. Wow. Just so much knowledge, so much wisdom. Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your time with us and having these fascinating conversations. I feel the same way as Louisa, where I'm like, I have about 500 other questions, but we're running out of time. So I just want to say thank you once again for joining us today. And I would love for you to share with our listeners where they can connect with you. If you want to share one more time about the books, the beautiful gift that you have. And for those of you listening, we will have all the links in the show notes below. So go check it out. But Julie, tell us where we can connect with you.
Yeah, angelic attendance, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next, just go to julieryangift.com psychicness.com. We'll send you a free digital and audiobook download. It's in Spanish too. And everything you can find at askjulieryan.com. We release 4 shows a week. 3 are interview shows. 1's a call-in show. We've got 5 channels on YouTube: English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and German. We are on all the podcast networks. There's 7 books. Book 8's coming out the end of the year. It's angel stories, real life angel stories of what's happened. And so it's a lot of fun. I do my training twice a year. I have online training, but I do 2 trainings in person. One's online. The next one's in October in Atlanta. That's a blast. People flying from all over the world to learn the buffet of psychicness in a weekend. And
So
we have a great
cool.
time. So lots going on.
Amazing.
Going on. Your website's amazing. There's so many wonderful resources. So everyone go on and check that out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again. We appreciate you so, so much. And yeah, this was an amazing conversation.
Oh, my honor. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Julie. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.